Okay. Okay, we're going to call to order the Planning, Environment, and Development Committee meeting of July 1st, 2024. And we'll have roll call. Jim?
Here.
John Reinert?
Here.
Carl?
Present.
Carolyn?
Here.
And by phone, we have Mr. Gademauer and Lou Ness. Could I have a motion by Jim to allow them to attend by phone, seconded by Carl. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Joe and Lou, you're on. Obviously, you can hear me.
Okay.
Okay. Do we have any public comment?
No, sir. We approved the minutes.
Oh, a motion to approve the minutes by Carl, seconded by
Second that.
John. Any discussion regarding the minutes? See, this is why I should never multitask anymore. Just don't work. Okay, public comment. You say no public comment? Okay, thanks. We'll move to members' comments. Members have any comments this morning? Lou, Joe, you guys have any members' comments?
No.
Okay, go ahead. We'll move on to new business then. Deliberation and selection for the McHenry County Conservation District. So I talked to everyone previous. This is going back to the applicants that we had about a month ago, I guess, it looks like.
Exactly a month.
How long ago was it?
I think it was exactly a month.
A month ago? Okay.
I'm sure they'll want.
And since we had someone from the Conservation District Board resign, we need to recommend another one for approval. And Chairman Bueller suggested that we would go back to the applicants that we had, since we had such good applicants the first time around. And so, how do you want to start the discussion on this? Go ahead, Carolyn.
Well, I know Kathy had sent out that list that we'd had the prioritization on that board in that email. I thought that might be a starting point.
The email that I don't have.
I think I'm having the same trouble. I can't get my emails to.
I can print that for you.
No, that's okay.
It's
okay. I'll get through the discussion. I want the committee to lead the discussion anyway. So.
My favorite was that Nora Zeller, the attorney for the environmental companies that she had represented. She seemed the most knowledgeable. She would have been one of my votes last month also. And talking about it to some of the other people, not that it matters, but, talking to like Elizabeth, they thought that, an attorney on the board might be, interesting to have, especially one that's well-versed. So I would be recommending Nora of the three.
Okay. Good point.
Yeah, so if you look back at the list, she had, in terms of who was next, Nora was next.
Yeah.
And Nora was actually my second pick. So at that time, so she'd be my first pick now.
Yep. Carol, ditto. Anything different? Jim, you want to weigh in, or we'll talk
I'm fine with that guy.
Joe, can you repeat that, please?
I'm fine with that, folks. She was on my list of people the first time, so.
Okay. Lou?
I'm in alignment with everything that's been said.
Okay. Jim wants to say something. I know he does.
Nope, nope, I'm gonna be quiet.
Okay.
You all right?
Yeah. I'm just trying to get my iPad.
Okay.
I know, that's so frustrating.
I guess for the audiences that we have here, we had these interviews a month ago. People came in. We reviewed the interviews, the applications prior to this meeting. That's why there's not going to be, doesn't look like there's going to be a whole lot more discussion on this, since the committee seems to be pretty much in agreement that on how this is going to go. So if the committee has no further conversation on this, we'll go to vote. Go ahead, Carolyn.
So I'll move to appoint Nora.
Okay. We got a motion to recommend Nora Lee Zeller for this position on the Conservation District, seconded by Carl. Any further discussion on how we want to handle this? Joe, Lou, any further discussion? before we vote?
No, I'm good.
Okay, they're good? Okay, we'll go to vote. John?
Yes.
Carl?
Yes.
Jim?
Yes.
Carolyn?
Yes?
Lou?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Okay, and I'll vote yes. So that went fast. Okay. Guess I can need those after all. Okay, we'll be recommending to the chairman that Nora Zeller be our recommendation for the Conservation District. Presentations, you got any presentations, Adam?
Sir.
Routine consent agenda, nothing. Discussion, conditional use permits.
Right. You're more than welcome.
I'll be.
All right. I'm handing out this is just an updated attachments. I'll give one to you. Thank you. You have one? I think did we print enough for us to, Renee?
Oh, I printed 8. Is that
All right.
not enough?
Yeah.
It should be.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Send a special thanks to Lou and Joe for being remote.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So this is a continuation of our conversation that we had previously. And so the primary discussion point was the duration of the approvals, principle, which we have kind of as a recommendation usually, or a standard at 10 years. Some of them at 20. That changes. I mean, if there's, let me see.
We have anything from 5 years to 50 years
50, right?
on the books. So the UDO does have a minimum standard of 10 years. So that's kind of the default. But if there's just extenuating circumstances, like the 5-year one was a case where they were approving something to bring it into compliance because it had so many violations. So the question was, are they really going to live up to the conditions? So they wanted to look at it again in 5 years. The 50-year one was because the use was just so innocuous that they figured it was going to be fine, but it still needed some kind of time limit on it.
Was that more like the church?
It was the church. And most churches have no time limit. The solar farms have no time limit.
So through the years, we get a lot of renewals for various application types. So landscape businesses is going to be one of our predominant case types. And they haven't pushed too hard for extending those, to go to 20 years, 25, 30 years. But it's one that we really haven't seen any denials on either. So it's another kind of vein of this conversation is if we see things that come to the board routinely and they're always approved, then what kind of barriers, other barriers that we lower that or extend the time frame so they don't have to come back and put that expense out. Just something to consider. And then there was another point that I'm going to make. Gravel pits was another one that came up in terms of their renewals and when we want to see them and when that whole process for gravel pits and how that would look in the light of the other additional considerations that the committee would like to see.
It wasn't too long, I'm sorry, but it wasn't too long ago we had a golf course and it was an issue because of the number of acres involved. Yet it had always been a golf course. It's going to continue to be a golf course in the foreseeable future. What did we change for them? We changed something for them on the cost of per acre cost or something for golf courses, and was that just them or?
No, it was, what we have done is like in the case of Tom's, when he had to get a conditional use for that permanent ag employee housing, We just advise people so that they don't have to pay for every acre that is part of the property, that they just legally describe a small area. And then the renewal fee is, I think it's $1,200 base. It is less than the original CUP. And then they're only paying the additional $50 an acre or whatever it is for an acre or two, instead of for the entire farm. So we have done that.
Okay.
We
And that makes
recommend
sense.
that to people, actually.
So, what we're trying to get down to whether we make like a straight rule or we take each one of these individually. And I find it difficult to take a straight rule approach on this because there are so many, even within the landscaping business, some of them are doing more people on the premise, and some of them have an off-site, and some of them do more of their wood chipping right at their house, and some of them don't. So how do you do them all at the same? I find that difficult.
Yeah, I agree.
Good.
You see like, I'm just looking through here, like landing strips, private strips and kennels. A kennel could go into an area where it starts to become a nuisance if they grow too much or, things change. I could see a case by case. It'd be hard to do a boilerplate on churches. I could see 50 years.
Jim, go ahead,
Most
sir.
churches are no time limit.
Yeah.
All right, I take a little bit different approach to this. I look at some of these business owners that have come forward, and you brought up Tom's. I just had the chance a few weeks ago to actually go look at that housing that used to be these trashy trailers for temporary housing. He came through and he did a zoning issue on that. And yet Tom is in the middle, his vegetable market is in the middle of subdivisions now. It's growing around and around and around. So if we give him a substantial investment in his entire property, but that to give housing, permanent housing with bathrooms and kitchens and everything else, to give that permanent housing, he put a substantial investment to do that. And if in 10 years he comes back, or whatever we gave him on that, 10 years he comes back and the city comes back and says, he's surrounded by city now, pretty much, comes back and they oppose that and say, we don't want that anymore. We don't want that housing. We don't want parts of that market. I don't believe we've given those owners a chance to recoup their investments that they make in these properties and pay taxes to the county and everything else, or substantial taxes. So that's kind of my difference here, where my opinion is just saying we're going to give 5 or 10 years to some of these folks. I have a problem with that. I'd like to come up with where we could get longer term on them, and then they have a substantial investment also in bringing forward the petitions, just the cost of their attorney's fees and everything else to do this. This guy has $10,000, $20,000 in some of these petitions that they bring forward. So rather than do that as frequently, I'd like to at least come up with a way that we can, if there's no violations in these conditional uses, if there's no violations, that we can kind of administrative extend them, or we come up with maybe a baseline 20 years on certain types of properties. Because we have an inconsistency of years on the same properties. Some of them are 10, some of them are 20 and 25, and they're similar kind of businesses and properties.
The argument for the investment.
And I don't know the answer yet.
The argument for the investment and the time frame, though, is just what is solar farms. They feel that their investment is there, that they need that time. They need that
State's giving them forever.
Well, I know, But that's something that a few of us in sitting at this table don't really think is the right thing to do. Yet, you know, if you go by investment and time frame, that's tough because
Right.
just because one guy spent more money on his property, he should get more years than the guy that has the same thing over here but spent less. And what do you do with something, and I hate to put one piece of property out there, but your example would be, what if that person sells off the back 100 acres and starts putting a subdivision in there, and then he still has his group of homes in there? That's a tough balance too.
But absolutely, if he needs those homes, he needs the workers, okay? Because he's maybe sold off the back half of that, which he has actually shrunk it down, but he's got 250 acres over in Union
Okay, let me
that those
rephrase that.
workers go to.
Let's say that he sells off all the land around those temporary housing units and there's a subdivision there.
As long as he's still in business, what's wrong with that? If he's still in business and he needs those workers, what's wrong with that?
Well, the ag employee housing has to be on the same property as the ag production.
Right. Ag production, he's got so many acres there.
Right.
If he keeps
So as
that
long as they're still
acreage,
in ag.
if he's got 5 acres that are ag production,
That's stretching the rules then.
well, you're stretching the rules, but it's true, he's got 250 acres 5 miles away, okay? He's not gonna build housing out there in the middle of the county, which is A1 zoning, and he's already made the investment. Why would he do that? I mean, that's just common sense that.
If he sells off there, Jim, and subdivides that, those would be $300,000 or $400,000 houses, and everybody in the neighborhood's gonna have a problem with that.
And my point, he was there and always has been there. He made the investment. Why should he be pushed out because we sit there and say, well, tough, 5 years from now, tough. And we know that whole thing could go in 5 years.
I don't know
In
what
a year, they were doing 80 acres a year.
It's his property. I don't know that if he sells off as a profit, that we would call it,
I
that we
understand.
would call it pushed out, or I wouldn't, but. Okay, I'm gonna get out of this one for a little bit and listen to some other
Yeah.
ones.
With the time limits, that's a debate that you'll have, or the county board will have, as conditions change.
I just don't like our initial going 10 years.
Yeah, Joe, please, go ahead.
Yeah, on Jim's point about we ought to take a look at each one of these and maybe treat them differently. I'd like to go longer, generally speaking, but I think the example you guys are using isn't a good one, because I do think that if Tom's decides to sell out, I can't imagine that he actually wants to keep those handful of trailers. You know, but that's, and I don't, and I'm like with you on that side, Larry, I don't believe that you're being pushed out if you decide to sell for profit, move. You know, because you've decided to sell for profit, move. But I don't have any trouble at all with us taking a good look and saying, let's maybe make it 15 years instead of 20 or 10, maybe, you know, but and a lot of times I think 10 years is too short. I mean, I can't imagine a gravel pit being finished in 10 years. Yet that's what we make them come back and do. You know, I know a lot of them left the industry when we had the crisis in '09. But I think the ones that are going inactive today want to stay going inactive today. I think that it's probably better to just look at the whole list and go, where, you know, is there a reason to change any particular one? Or do you want to, you know, or do you want to go to a longer period for all of them? And I could do either one.
Okay, thank you. Lou, did you have anything you want to put in there?
Well, you know, as I listened to the conversation, it occurs to me that the county and the land use changes over time, as do the businesses that come in and out. And I think whatever we can do to provide a sense of continuity and stability for people who want to invest in McHenry County, it's worth a look. The other thing I think is that ordinances are created at a certain point in time under those conditions, and it's always worth reviewing whether they actually work in today's world. I mean, maybe they do work, or maybe they do need modification. So it's an important conversation to have, and I certainly appreciate that we're being thoughtful about how we take this forward.
What's staff's recommendation? What is realistically that we can enforce? I mean, there's no, we can make a recommendation, but if we can't enforce it, then we're back to spinning our wheels. So.
Sure. Well, first and foremost, the county board has the ability and the authority to amend and add those conditions on the floor. In terms of the years, the duration, they are case by case. And so if some of these factors look like maybe coming back in 10 years would be undue, or for whatever reason, you know, it's just not, it doesn't demand it to come back in 10 or 15, or we just see a desire to push it out, then the county board, as it sits right now, has that authority. That would, I think that would be the best way to exercise in the immediate. But if there's a bigger desire to kind of change the renewal process in its entirety, that's certainly a bigger undertaking in terms of amendments they would have to comply with state statutes and our the conditional use process in general. So that would be a little bit of an inventive process, I would say, untested.
I have an opinion.
Go ahead, Jen.
You know, I think on some of the ag use, temporary or, conditional use, and Jim's got a good point, when it costs a lot of money to go ahead and make a new conditional use meeting and set all that up, maybe we could make when it's deemed like an ag use or something like that, that could be an administrative duty that you could just give him another 10 years based on the fact that there were no violations during his first 10 or what we give him. Maybe some, just a boilerplate administerial on certain types of conditional uses. As for like a zoning change, when they sell out and they have some housing left, if they're going to sell off, they're going to annex that in to develop the property. I don't see why somebody, and not to say Tom's directly, but somebody like that even, that would almost be an annexation agreement, because they're going to, when they get more than half of their property in there, they're probably going to annex in to that village or that town. So I don't know if that really bodes well with me, your argument on that one, Jim.
Jen, just follow up, John. When you say the ag properties, is there anything specific you're thinking of?
Well, I mean, if there's like a long-term, because we're always, ag, our ag tourism and what we're doing right with that. I mean, if they're still under, and we gave them 20 years comes up, if they've done nothing wrong and they're still a viable business, why should they have to spend all the money and come in for?
Okay, I wasn't thinking of the ag tourism when you said that, that's all.
Yeah, but when it relates to that, right?
Okay. Yep, gotcha.
And in response to that, the remaining part of those properties in an annexation agreement, they normally don't annex those into the cities. They would remain county, even if they're totally surrounded. Okay, so in your annex agreement, it's just flat out doesn't say that they have to discontinue their business or discontinue their housing or everything. If they want to stay in business, that's flat out. They're not annexing. If they sell that property to a developer, the developer's going to annex it. And so it's beyond their control at that point. And I'm not, Tom's maybe not the great example. You still have like Von Bergens and Stoddies and Goberts, Goberts in Kane County. But they invest a substantial amount of money in those properties.
And I
And to
respect
give them
that.
10 years, I think is not good.
And I respect that, and if Tom's operation is still that ag business, you know, tourism, to sell the farmer's goods, then that really hasn't changed anything. But when he changes it and he doesn't have that, and he's just got the housing and such, then he's not gonna get an extension.
But he still has the market and he has the
Well, exactly,
part
my
that's
point is,
developed.
yeah, if he still.
So you're
has-
saying don't give him the extension?
No, I'm saying yes,
Possibly?
if he still has the market, right? But if he closes his shop,
Right, if he closes the market itself,
Right.
it's gone. It's all
Yeah,
gone. He
exactly.
sold it out for profit.
yeah.
He doesn't need that land right there necessarily. He doesn't intend to give it up. I've had that conversation. He doesn't intend to give that up, but I'm saying he has acreage.
So maybe I just read it wrong, because I thought you were just gonna say, let him have the housing in perpetuity.
No, he still would have his market there. He's got more of an investment in that
As long as
market.
he still has his market there.
Right, right.
Yeah, okay.
But
I
then
think
he
I
doesn't need the
misunderstood what you were
conditional
saying.
use if the market's gone.
Yeah,
He doesn't need that conditional use any longer if the market is closed.
But that's one example in the county, but I think the ag tourism is, we have more of that type of stuff that we would be
Exactly.
thinking about. Carolyn, did you have something?
Well, no, I was just thinking it through a little bit, because, I mean, it is hard to know, right, what's gonna happen down the line, and Adam was saying that some of these can be extended on the floor. We have the ability to extend this in, you know, if you make a good case, this is a lot of investment, you know, he's been there a long time, whatever, on a case-by-case basis. So we already have that ability to do that, is what I'm understanding, right? And so, and oftentimes there can be very good cases for why we would extend it. I guess the question, if I'm hearing it right, I think the question that we're trying to explore today is, are there categories that we just make longer up front so that we're more consistent? I mean, if we're coming back and doing the landscaping people every single time and we're extending it, you know, should we be making it 15 years? I don't know, you had mentioned something about, I don't know if that's you said something about adhering to state statute. I mean, I would assume that we have the ability to just say we can go to 15 years on landscaping and they have to come back. Or maybe after 10 years, they get an automatic 5-year renewal if they haven't had any violations and they don't have to come before us for that time period. And then we start the process over. Now they've got 15 years at a stretch. But we would have to do that by category. I mean, in the meantime, we can protect property owners like, you know, in a situation like this, but where are we trying to go?
The question with state statute is, I don't know, we would have to consult the state's attorney's office if we could do this administratively, because the process for conditional use is set out in the state statute.
So the public hearing process is really what the
very
state
good
statute
point.
is trying to protect.
Mhm.
And so some of the other peripheral items that come with that renewal and that public hearing process is gonna be the ability for code compliance, you know, so to bring things up from the 70s to the 90s to the 2020s, a lot of codes and a lot of regulations have changed. So those are some of the other things that would be, I wouldn't say lost, but, you know, so the public hearing process is one thing that I don't want to say it can't be avoided, but we're not sure sitting here today how that can be, if you will, sidestepped or manipulated to achieve an administrative review or some lower threshold. And then that would be another component. It would be just code compliance and upgrades to keep current.
So the requirements for the public hearings, et cetera, that's where the costs come in, that's why the fees are high, and there's no way around that because of state statute for the, that we know of, until we check with the state's attorney's office. So for us to say we could automatically, for us to say we can automatically renew it administrative, even that discussion is sort of out of time without going to the state's attorney's office
Correct.
first.
We have no idea.
So because I do like some idea of if it's a 10-year
Right.
use and it's substantially the same, nobody's complaining, they don't have any violations, you administratively renew it for 50% of the another 5 years or whatever.
Boilerplate, you know.
Yeah, I could see that, but if we need to talk to the state's attorney's office first, can you
And that's, so one of the things that we talked about just as the annual goals and going forward, next year's goals are always gonna be amendments to the UDO. And as part of that, I mean, we bring in and confer with the state's attorneys because a lot of the UDO is set up by state statute. So that certainly is something that we can take as direction and then fold it into those amendments going forward over the next couple months as well. But, yeah.
Carolyn, did you have something else?
Yeah, well, you just mentioned something that was, so you said something like, okay, so updating code and everything like that. So the renewal process then, is that the only opportunity to make sure that they're now currently compliant with code? I mean,
Shy of new construction, it is. I mean, when the day things are approved under the building code, or they're allowed to stay there until they have either a new use or some other change of use or occupancy. That renewal process doesn't trigger building modifications unless there's a use that has some detrimental effect. And so what that's defined by in the building code would be something like floor drains, you know, to just basically groundwater protection. That's one that comes up pretty frequently if there's maintenance inside a building for trucks or something like that, and for a business and they don't have floor drains, then that would be a trigger, or toilet rooms or something like that would offer accessibility issues. Outside of that, we don't make them rebuild, you know, structures or anything like that, or electrical systems that may be antiquated, yes, but are functional. So that's an opportunity for it aside from general renovations, new construction.
Okay, Lou, do you have anything further on this?
No, I'm good.
Okay, thank you, Joe.
I would say that the best chance we have is something like a condition we put on conditional use permits that says if in fact there's been no problem or changes, we could actually write it as a condition, you get an automatic 15 years instead of 10, something like that.
I like that.
That might be able to avoid that. That might be able to avoid that process, but again, you'd still have to clear it through the state's attorney's office. But I'd be more than happy to have something like that be one of our conditions. You know, do they qualify for the administrative review in 10 years if they do these things? And I don't know why you couldn't put that as a condition.
Yeah, that's a good thought. Thank you.
We could call it the current condition.
Well,
Yeah.
Do whatever you want. As long as the solar farm can do it, you can do it.
okay, yeah, thanks, Joe. So I'm not sure where else we can go with this right now.
Sure.
One step at a time, we talked to the state's attorney's office about Mr. Gadamaller's thoughts on that and revisit it in a month. And maybe by then we'll go through these different ones, and then if you guys can figure out a way to categorize them, or if staff has any suggestions that they'd like to put forward in categorizing them or time limits. I guess I'm going to stick with the idea that they're so individual. That's why we look at them each one individually. So I don't see how you can categorize them, but I'm open to the conversation.
And every month you'll get 3 to 4 that you can kind of review with this lens that are coming forward. So like I said, you have the authority to apply this concept if you see one that's so fit or have the discussion. We're happy to help facilitate.
Okay. Anyone else have anything further on this? Because otherwise I don't see that we're really moving forward with it. Other than checking with the state's attorney's office about the automatic administrative, or have it built in like a condition like Mr. Gadamaller said.
I have one last question
Go ahead,
for
Jim.
Adam. And anything that doesn't say renewal time, do they have an ending?
No, the renewals category is just people who have renewed.
Right.
So they have a time limit. So the time limit category is the time limit. So all the zeros that you see there, like all the cemeteries that we start
Right.
out with, all have 0 time limits.
So they're forever.
They're forever.
That's okay.
Yeah, yeah, but we have had a number of people, I think, and the most, I think the line 28, that gravel pit, is the oldest conditional use we have, and it's been renewed 4 times. So, a 10-year period, so it's at least 40 years old out there, so.
Yeah, I mean, there's some things here, dog kennel with no time limit. So there's some things that have been done that we probably want to look at, and maybe that's not something we would repeat. So, okay,
Absolutely.
check with the state's attorney's office, put it on the agenda for next month, and, okay, we'll move forward to drain tile requirement related to solar facilities. Adam, you're gonna help us with this one?
We received state's attorney opinion late Friday afternoon that bolstered the state law's authority. How's that? So the IAMA is included as part of the contract or part of the conditional use permit for solar farms. And that has the regulatory authority over the drain tile, over the drainage for solar farms.
I'm sorry, can you just say that again?
The agriculture, what is it, the Illinois Agricultural Impact Mitigation.
AMA? Whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, it has stipulations in the state law that the drainage and drain tile, if it's damaged, it needs to be repaired in reasonable time frame. It's one sentence. Our code, the SMO, has requirements for drain tile replacements. As we were talking about last month, they are in there as part of the code with some engineering exceptions. If there's something that would otherwise make it so that it's not the best idea to replace those drain tiles, drainage, other swales, bypasses, whatever. In the case that brought this issue to the surface was a solar farm that actually did replace their drain tiles. So some of the things that you were talking about, John, that, hey, maybe be careful what we wish for, may be occurring. That now there's flow with this farm that may have had some partially clogged or some clogged drain tiles. When we reviewed the site, we didn't see any specific penetrations or wet spots or areas where they may have damaged them inadvertently, even though they did replace them. But and so with that, it's kind of, hey, we'll still look, we'll still see. One of the things that we relayed to Member Von Bergen, who brought this issue to our attention, was this is the time to see it. So if that person that brought that to them has more information or there's something for us to see, we'll get out there. I mean, the last thing we want is this to occur in November or December and that water flow overtops the ditch and now we have ice on the roads or anything like that. So if there's a drainage issue, we'll certainly continue to respond. But back to the policy portions, while we have exercised the authority in the stormwater management ordinance, there is this concern that the IAMA may still have control or supersede, specifically, the SMO authority. And so, not that we're overstepping, right? Not that we're overstepping our bounds, but completely in our opinion. But the state's attorney may have taken the rug out from underneath us.
So you do what you can and try to enforce it to the point where they say you can't. There's some pushback from them about saying, hey, we don't have to do what you say. Okay, I get that part. But who makes the decision if we have the drain tile running across the southwest corner and that's not going to work, we're going to move it up over here to the northeast corner? Who makes a decision that it's okay to do that? Who engineers it? Who designs it?
The applicant's engineer would propose that solution to us. We would review it to confirm that potentially it's a viable solution. We would prefer that drain tiles are not changed that much, just because if this is ever to go back to farmland, we want to maintain that existing integrity and functionality if it does go back to farmland.
Yeah, I was just exaggerating a little bit to see where the engineering
That
came
does
from.
happen.
Yeah.
So it would be on the property owner to engineer it to your standards and approval.
Correct, and what we typically see is the applicant as the solar farm that's leasing from that ag property, they tend to work with that ag owner as well, before they're making those determinations, or at least we encourage them to do so, since they're a stakeholder in that as well.
Okay. Carolyn, go ahead.
Okay. So, two approaches. AIMA is saying, looking at the drainage and drain tile needs to be repaired in a reasonable period of time, basically. And we're saying, but ours says, requirements for drain tile replacements with some engineering exceptions. So in this particular case with the solar farm, where when they fixed it, now there's flooding, would that have been
Downhill. Downstream.
Yeah, right, wherever it's flowing, right, okay. But we'd had this discussion a little bit earlier at one of our other meetings where, there could be situations where we fix these things and then we create a problem because something has settled in over time with the way that they've either been functioning or not functioning, and I know the repurpose for them, I really do. So, but the question becomes, so now we have a situation where a landowner is now impacted by the fact that they were fixed. Is that what I'm hearing?
Or 40 landowners, if it's a subdivision.
Well, what I'm trying to get at is this, because we want people to make sure that they're being responsible about what's happening with these drain tiles, but we also have to be aware of what's gonna happen to adjacent property owners but what I'm hearing is AIMA's gonna take precedence anyway, but I guess the issue is how do we solve that problem?
So, I guess breaking it apart, there's the one of the issues I guess that was expressed there was like an inundation. The stormwater management ordinance and Stoyan's team, they're gonna look at the impact of the development on not only how stormwater and how water is managed, but is it going to basically have undue impact to neighbors? Does drainage, would it wipe out, wash out neighbors to the adjacent properties? If that's the case, then they would have more of a controlled release design or some other impediment that would not allow that. And so that's coming from a couple different areas. One is the SMO, and then Illinois drainage law would require that similar piece. So that's a little bit, I would say, a tangent from the SMO, because that is something that's not necessarily enforced by the SMO and by our staff. It's kind of a civil liberty. Everybody has the right so that if you do something on your property, it doesn't wash somebody else out. So anything that isn't covered under the SMO, there's protections from all neighbors under that Illinois drainage law.
So, okay, so fixing the drainage tile is important, but then you're saying you could do a thing like a fix to controlled release design. So that if you're starting to notice the water is flowing more freely, but it's potential for flooding, then they would have to come in there and do some kind of design to hold, I don't know how that works. But,
and that's where the engineering, those applications come in and they demonstrate that to the staff. That's where that review really gets into the nitty gritty with our engineers and their engineers working through what that actual site design is.
and currently we have that ability otherwise, other than this whole thing with solar.
Outside of solar farms?
Yeah.
We do, yeah. It's in the SMO as any property, any development that might encounter drain tiles to come up with a solution if you're gonna be impacting them to reroute or revise your development to work with the existing drain tiles.
And we know for sure that AIMA comes first with this vague language.
It's based on the state's attorney's office, the opinion of that state law and how and everything that they do in that review, they've stated that the AIMA it supersedes the authority of the SMO as it relates specifically to the solar farms.
AMA supersedes Illinois drainage law also?
That's,
We had a big discussion internally.
The state's attorney is wrong on that, if it does.
I will say, Jim, our SMO also is mandated through state statute as well. So the state statute requires us to have an SMO related to dealing with flooding and development and all of those factors. Drain tiles are obviously a part of that.
Which is the Illinois drainage law, which was, they've been there forever.
Separate from that, it's a specific statute for us to have a countywide stormwater management ordinance. Yeah. So how all of these pieces fit together and which one climbs to the top.
It's a frustrating argument. It's a frustrating discussion. Yeah, I get it, as legislators.
so that's further review, right? So we looked into it further?
Thus, we had considered in the past, on the Stormwater Commission, we have considered that when a subdivision, and so I'm off the solar side of it, I'm into a subdivision, when they tie into the farmer's field tiles, and then the capacity exceeds and they're blowing out the tiles down the line, all the way to the end source, the creek or the ditch, wherever it goes to, that we had talked about having that development repair it all the way to the end source, you know, following the Illinois drainage law, that repair it to that. And then we had also talked about that if the landowner downstream refused to grant them access to the property, that they at least would have to bond it for a couple of years, so that when that landowner said, oh, it's flooding my property, let's go in and fix it. Now he grants access to fix it, or the bonding's there to fix that issue. And that's always been part of my issue, and the people that I deal with or talk to, is the bonding, one, which in the solar farms, the bonding is for decommissioning. You know, the bonding is not for fixing issues that are cost. Again, I disagreed with the state's attorney when he said that we could draw on that bonding to fix that issue. I don't think we can. You know, because the bonding specifically says decommissioning.
It seemed to make sense to me, but
I was present for that one.
Right. And so this is why this is a great discussion, to all these discrepancies and conflicts, that we need to handle it somehow. And because the state in their solar farm push for solar farms and different things, and basically running over all the other statutes and the laws that currently we have. And as for the example, the one up in that we're talking about, solar farm that Von Bergen brought up, the issue there is possibly the water is flowing now, but now it's going downstream, and that tile was there in the past, and maybe the old tiles don't work, but they connected into those tiles, and that part's all property. The solar farm then has done their issue if it's not broken, and then it's blown out past them on the downstream, further downstream. That would be an assumption, because the old tiles were clay. New tiles that they put in were probably the PVC. They didn't put clay in. And so my point there is, thus really stresses the importance of pushing for these drainage districts to be able to help that with all the surrounding properties. If that were in Hebron drainage district, they wouldn't have this problem, because they'd go in and fix it downstream. You understand what I'm saying? They would go in and fix that flooding. But if this is in an area where there is no drainage district, they don't have that ability. So there's another cause of that. So, and maybe if we don't ever get a drainage district renewed, we're beating a dead horse.
Good.
If I may, to Jim's point, a property owner could, in theory, just replace their existing drain tile as part of maintenance. This can still be a problem whether or not you have a solar farm there, where they know that they've had a clog for years, they repair that, And, you know, then it does create an issue downstream because now that clog is no longer there, so.
It doesn't necessarily have to be a solar farm. Somebody fixes something here, it's
Exactly.
going there.
With the drain tiles,
Like-
yeah.
Yeah,
Importance of maintenance is that we wouldn't know about it, right? It wouldn't trigger a permit, it wouldn't be regulated. at that
Correct,
point, right?
yeah. They wouldn't necessarily need to come to us because they're repairing in kind, same size, just, again, replacing something that's been
And-
damaged.
sure. I mean, I'm sure part of the difficulty is the owners that do not live in McHenry County, but they own big parcels of land. As long as they get their rent, and they don't care about that acre in the corner that floods anymore compared to when it was everybody had their 160 acre farm and took care of it. And that's why we don't have much luck getting the drainage districts up and running in some of these areas. So,
Yeah, on parcels where the ownership is not in state, they're renting it out, it is not uncommon for us to get phone calls with potential drain tile replacement happening, and it's the farmer who's renting from the original owner.
so, the takeaway though is, we went out to the one that there was an issue by, Solon.
Yep.
We did our part, they did their part. It's unfortunate, as far as we know, everything is correct. It's unfortunate that it's flooding the guy out downstream, but it almost comes to his responsibility then to fix his tile.
You're exactly right.
So why would we put a bond on that to fix?
Somebody else's.
But that's not the issue. It's been investigated, okay? It's been investigated. That's not the problem, right? They've said that's not the problem. So you don't need the bond on that part.
What's not the problem? What do you mean? I'm sorry.
The problem is they fixed the tile on that property and they replaced it.
So they don't need to put.
The
bonds out.
downstream issue is, thus the need for drainage district. The downstream is the issue, not that particular property, because in the Illinois drainage law, they haven't restricted the flow, right? The solar farm hasn't restricted the flow. They've taken care of that issue according to your investigation. They have taken care of that. So if they took care of it, it is not their responsibility nor their bond. But if they cause an issue, like the capacity, they change the capacity, which is a subdivision issue. They're changing the capacity with storm drainage in a subdivision, flowing into a 12-inch tile that doesn't have the capacity, that already has everything else flowing in. There's where the bonding issue really needs to be. And that.
The subdivision typically is in, municipality. How do we work with municipalities or enforce that municipality to say, hey, you have to have a bond?
With our drainage, with our stormwater drainage for that agriculture, if they want to feed into that tile, they need to make sure that capacity is there for that tile.
They're required to adopt our SMO, and so if the language is in there, then at a minimum, they would need to adhere to those standards.
So that's something we can enforce?
Okay. Yes, and if they're not doing their job, let's say they're a municipality that has shown they have the technical abilities to administer their own stormwater reports, that's why we ask for stormwater permits every year. If folks end up calling, we can audit, and potentially they would lose their ability to administer their own stormwater reports if they're not following specific portions of the SMO.
Okay. So where do you want to, is there anything else to the presentation? You guys did your part on the one in Solon. It's unfortunate, but that it's up on the landowner that's downstream has to either take care of it or not.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna mention, for that one specifically, the drain tile survey came back and showed that there was damage or a clog near the right-of-way. So presumably, once that was fixed, now that drain is going to the right-of-way to an existing culvert. So none of that drainage or the pattern has been changed. It's just the fact that it hasn't been working properly for however many years previous to this point.
So I say good job on our part, you guys.
We believe so. Thank you.
So the landowners on the opposite side downstream and the road, is that a county road? No.
I don't believe so. I think it's
The
township.
township,
I think it's
Solon
township.
maybe.
on that road, if they've got it up to the road and then underneath the road, it's blocked, they need to take care of that, or the downstream landowner needs to take care of his part. And so the solar farm in that case is off the hook, because they've done it.
Well, I would think.
But I'm saying,
Any
we
landowner.
make it for every solar farm that comes forward has to do that, right? They have to do their tiles.
Yes, we do require it, and we require an as-built before we allow them to actually start driving their piles, just so we know that there aren't gonna be any conflicts.
Yeah.
We've had too many examples where the pile guys are showing up at the same time as the drain tile replacement. And so, no applicant has really said no to that, and because they can replace their tile in kind, they can get going on that much sooner, so a lot of them have been taking advantage of that, and it hasn't really been an issue to this point. It's been working well.
Okay.
And I'm satisfied with that, because I think I'm one of the ones that brought this forward. So I'm
Yeah.
satisfied with that.
Okay. Good presentation, thank you. We lost Joe. Lou, did you have anything else you want on this presentation?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thanks, guys. This isn't for action. We're not, you don't need any direction, because you did what you were supposed to do. That's the best we got right now. Okay.
Appreciate it. Yeah, we'll keep following up on it.
Okay, sounds great.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
We'll move on to pool barrier regulations associated with McHenry Department of Health.
I was gonna grab another seat in case Christie wanted to come up.
All right,
Yes,
Dave,
ma'am.
now we're getting a professional here.
Say that.
So this sort of come up because our regulations are different than some of the municipalities, is that correct?
That's correct. So I've just prepared a very brief background for you, just so you know how we got to the spot that we're in. So the regulations that we currently have in place go back to 1990 to 1992. They were put in place intentionally in the health ordinance by the county board at that time after a tragic drowning that occurred in the county. So the county board was intending to capture all the pools in the county, so existing and proposed, and to put it in the health ordinance so it impacted every pool in the county. And at that time, P&D staff actually went through a massive project, and they identified every residential pool in the county, and there were somewhere between 8,000 and 10,000 of those, and we followed up on every one of those pools. And when it was put in place, shortly after the first approval, the county board came back and put in some allowances for existing pools prior to that date if they were within 15% of the design specification, so close but not perfect, and or if they were separated from other residences by 200 to 500 feet or more, because that separation was considered a protective layer, to protect small children. And just as a reminder, the pool barrier requirements are all intended to prevent the drowning of children, typically under the ages of 5 or 6. And so at the time it went into place, we did poll all the municipalities. It was never our intention to go into all the municipalities and do all that for them, but just to ensure that they had ordinances in place that were as stringent as ours. And there were only a couple at the time that did not, small ones. I think it was Bull Valley at the time, it might have been Hebron, something like that. But all the larger ones had their pool barrier ordinances, were enforcing them, so we really had very little involvement there. The issue that's arisen is that when the health ordinance was put into place at the time, it specifically prohibited pool barrier covers in lieu of a barrier. And so from a public health perspective, we always want to say layers of protection, right? So we're going to say have a barrier, then put the pool barrier cover on, and then have an alarm in there, you know what I mean, so that you cover every possibility. But since that time, there have been some municipalities who have adopted the International Swimming Pool and Spa Code, which is obviously an international code, right? It does allow for the pool covers that meet an ASTM standard in lieu of the barriers. So that really is really essentially the difference between our codes. The other requirements are very, even though it was put in place a long time, are very relevant and really essentially current today. So what I am looking for is really direction as to, does the county board want to continue to have the health department set the minimum standard for the pool barriers, or to defer that to the municipalities who, you know, have their own building codes and are looking, you know, in issuing those permits. I think the last thing I would like to point out is the difference is that the building code is going to address the construction of it. I'm not doubting, I don't think anyone does, that a pool cover that meets that ASTM standard is adequate to keep little kids from falling in it when the cover is in place. And I think the problem, you know, that a pool cover does not address, that a barrier that is in place all the time with the self-closing latching gate does, is that if the pool cover is not in place, the potential still remains. So that's what I'm looking for is direction. We are looking to update the health ordinance this year and are working on that, is to whether or not we want to continue to set that minimum standard, in which case I'll work with Melissa and Pete and to reach out to the municipalities and address that issue.
So we would have to go to the municipalities that have the ordinance that a cover is good enough and ask them to change their ordinance, or tell them that we would be enforcing our ordinance within their city limits?
That would be the question, exactly, is to discuss with them how they would like to approach that. Because ours would be the minimum standard remaining throughout the county.
But we could enforce that within their city limits.
We could.
If that was the decision to keep it the way it is and give you direction to go ahead and enforce it.
That's correct.
Okay.
Larry, I have a question.
Sure.
Prior to putting the ordinance in place, do we know how many children drowned in swimming pools?
I do not within McHenry County, certainly. But there are national numbers that I could get for you, certainly, if you would.
No, I just, you know, here's the thing. I think I really applaud the intent to save children from accidents such as these. But I am really hesitant to tell municipalities what they should or shouldn't do inside their city limits. And I'm actually not in favor of doing that. So I feel a little like I want to trust municipal leaders to do the right best thing for their residents, and I don't know that the county, that's our responsibility. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Carl?
Kind of a side note, either you or Adam, if you can help me understand why we kind of go crazy-fied having all fences and whatnot to get into the pools, but on the chain of lakes, nobody cares.
That's really
You have the same exact situation. You can go right off, you know, the streams or whatever and drown. Nobody says you gotta have a guarded fence.
right.
But a pool, oh my, do not have a pool. Even if your pool is 5 foot away from the lake.
Right, and it really goes back to really statistics about when they look at drownings for children under the age of 5 or 6, where those drownings occur. And I don't have the current numbers, and I'd be more than happy to get them for you, but essentially, statistically, they're much more likely to drown in a pool than they are in a surface body of water, and that comes up quite often. It's a very good question.
I can imagine too, because a kid would get wet in a lake and he'd walk out because it's a slow.
Well,
Not always, you know.
No, you're right, but I mean in most
And you
cases,
have the
yeah.
current that'll rip.
Yeah, well, that's a
the
river,
nipper
though, not a
sink.
lake.
Stand up and it's knee deep, you fall down and it's taking you 5 miles down the trip.
So the only question I had though was, unless of course you're done.
Oh, I'm done. I said a side note.
Do many municipalities rely on our leadership with the pool regulations? I know, I imagine Crystal Lake and Algonquin, they have their own building departments, they have their own everything, maybe a smaller one.
I am not aware of a single building department, unless Adam is at this point in time, municipal one, that is not issuing all their own permits and things for that, for the new ones
Can
at
we
all.
separate to stay in our own lane? I mean, you know, if they have their own, we would stay out of that, right? But if they don't, where they rely on us, we would go into those villages that don't have building departments, right?
Did you want to answer that?
No,
Okay, I was just
yeah,
gonna say that, so when.
I'd rather have you answer it, Peter.
So when Adam adopted the same code, specifically, he took out the pool barrier cover as an option, as the safety barrier. So if that were the case, our requirements align specific, the county is very consistent. Ours and, you know, the building code are exactly, really essentially the same. And so if we're not involved in the municipal part from the barrier standpoint, then really we will just have to address what we'd like to do with the 132 pools left that we still have, that have the exemptions, 15%, 200 feet or 500 or greater. Those are on a 5-year cycle. In the health department, we follow all of those. Some of them, you have to record some things with the property. 17 of those are located within municipal limits. So if we were to remove this portion from the health ordinance, we would then advise the municipalities of those, and then they would follow up as they saw fit within their municipal
That
limits.
makes sense to me.
Good, Carolyn.
So part of the reason you did this in the first place, because you said it was a tragic drowning at the time, and you saw it as a health issue, which does not know municipal boundaries, right? So a lot of the things we do at the health department aren't limited by where that boundary is, right? So you saw it as an opportunity to make sure that this health issue, which it is, if somebody loses their life because of lax standards, so that was why that was put in place. Sounds like really the only difference between us and the municipalities that are as active as we are is this whole thing about the barrier and whether or not that cover is good enough in all situations to provide that protection. Right?
That's correct.
I'm not sure, you know, I get that I'm all about municipalities being able to determine their own destinations on a lot of things. That's, you know, kind of where I come from anyway. But it also gets difficult if we have kind of standards that are, you know, that are different from one municipality to the next. I mean, people do move between municipalities. Not a big deal. They can learn the new rules. But I mean, if we're primarily on the same page, having that universal approach, I think is okay. I guess, so I'm not necessarily ready to cut that out of the ordinance, but I guess I'm open to the discussion, right?
Do you think the municipalities that put the cover as their standard into effect know what our health department standards are?
Yes, so.
I mean, you've contacted them and.
Well, we have tried. So whenever we update the ordinance, so in the last 4 or 5 cycles, I send all of them, you know, in their entirety with summaries and things like that to the municipalities. I really don't receive any comments typically. But we have not in the last 5 years, I can tell you, reached out specifically to municipalities and said, this is what's in the health ordinance, how does it compare to yours? We have not done that.
Okay.
But I'm saying we could do that.
I would just be curious why they went that route, knowing if they knew we had this in place, why they would have went that route.
Right. I'm just making a guess and to say, I've been here an awfully long time and I remember all these things, but I'm not guessing that, you know, their staff has stayed the same in every one. And, you know, we lost the continuity is all I'm saying. You know, we should have reached out more frequently, I think, and we probably should have been more active in making, you know, them aware of that.
Okay.
Probably just don't.
Well, if you're looking for direction, my thought on it would be to reach out to them and see what pushback they would have if they just adopted some standard that the cover was the way to go without considering our health department's position on it. And maybe they would be willing to say, okay, that's fine, we'll make ours match yours, just as we have to make our stuff match state stuff. And it could all be standard then. Does that make sense, or?
Yes,
I mean,
I am happy to do that, to reach out and.
And then if they just push back and say, no, this is the standard that we've adopted and we're not gonna follow through with it, then we have to make the decision about forcing or changing.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Lou, did you have
Yeah,
something?
Larry, I would want to know how the municipalities feel about this. And whether or not, because I'm gonna consider that they have smart people at their table too, who made their decision based on information that they had, that they are committed to protecting children and having safety in the municipality. I, I am, how many children have drowned since that?
Since they were put in place,
Yeah,
I don't have the number in front of me. I think I'm only aware of one or two.
No, I'm aware
yeah,
of
so
one.
it's
I'm
not like
aware
we have an
of two.
epidemic. I mean, I don't know. I'm not ready to force municipalities to abide by our ordinance when it doesn't seem like there's really a significant safety risk out there.
One or two seems significant to me.
Yeah, there could be the argument made, I guess, Lou, that even one is too many, but.
Well, I'm not diminishing the death of a child,
Yeah.
but I'm hesitant to create laws and regulations based on one incident and saying that we haven't put safety structures in place for the greater community. I'm not diminishing one. I would really just like to be more informed before I make a decision on this.
Okay, well, we wouldn't be creating, we would be changing our ordinance to match theirs.
Right, right.
So, or asking them to abide by our ordinance, just as the state does to us. Carolyn.
Just, we also have to keep in mind that these have been in place since, 1990, 92?
Yes.
And we haven't had a lot of incidences, probably because of the standards that were put into place and the protections that were put into place. And so I think part of this is us, whether or not we want to lower our standard, which is, I know it's an international standard, but whether or not we want to lower our standard and how we want to go forward with that. I mean, obviously these are working. And we want to make sure that that protection is there. So I'm good to find out what more is happening.
See where the pushback is, or whether they would agree with ours and bring it back to us?
I will do that.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
That's good by everybody? Good, thank you, Patty.
Thanks, Patty.
Thank you. Thank you for the professional presentation, Patty.
Okay.
Always good to see you, John.
Move on to reports, 9.1. Renee, you have some CBA information for us?
So this month, you have 4 petitions that you'll be looking at. 3 are on the consent agenda, and 2 of them went to ZBA, have unanimous approval, and 1 of them went to the hearing officer. It's just a variation and has his recommendation for approval as well. And then you have 1 that's not on the zoning consent agenda. It'll be on the zoning regular agenda, and that is the consideration of Prairie Enterprises. That's the one on the old Flowerwood property that the city of Crystal Lake has formally objected to.
Okay, and that's the one where it was postponed or to this month coming, and they were gonna talk to the city of Crystal Lake? Do we have any further information on that?
This is, I thought that we did that to a date specific of September or October, didn't we?
I think that was Nisus.
No, that was the TV show
Nisus.
thing.
Yeah, Nisus.
Survivor.
Okay, yeah, you're, okay, my bad, yeah, that is
So this one is coming up, this
Yeah.
month again.
Do we have any information from the city of Crystal Lake?
I don't.
You don't, okay. We don't know that they changed their position at all. If
I think
not,
that Pete might, do you have information on that, Pete, or no?
Yeah, I mean, in fact, there has been some exchange of information between the developer and the city, but I don't see a real negotiation at this point. And neither position seems to be really moving from the original position. Adam and myself will be meeting with Patty 40 minutes to talk a little bit further about the proximity of the development to existing water in the ground and the potential for a sleeve under Route 14 to further make that opportunity more proximate, but we've not finalized a position on that.
The potential or the fact that there is an existing under it?
We believe there is an existing sleeve.
Yeah.
So,
Existing.
you know, essentially, I'm going to be real careful. Sorry, Patty left, but our ordinance says that you are within your 1,000 feet of an existing water source, municipal water source. Then it becomes a bigger lift to dig another well. So if they're required to tap into that existing municipal water source, it does open up another series of questions and or potentially empowers Crystal Lake a little bit more. So I'm going to leave it there. We got a meeting in 40 minutes and we'll get some more information. We follow back up with the same.
Yeah, I'd rather hold my comments back till you get all of your information.
Great, and then will you be emailing that or some type of report out?
I think we have to get some kind of a communication out, yeah.
I mean, if we're gonna be just deliberating this at the next county board meeting, we need to know what happened at that meeting, I guess, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sorry we didn't have that today. We had staff in and out at the end of last week. So
Yeah. 4th of July coming up.
Yeah,
There's a
and
lot.
as long as we have it, a few days before the county board meeting, so everybody can review it properly.
I mean, I certainly have my
We'll have it by
opinions,
the
but
cow
I'll hold
meeting.
back everything.
Oh, by the cow, that's what, actually, we should do it, yeah, review it by the cow, yeah, sure. Okay. I think that's all we need to do on that then, right?
Thank you for
That's
that.
it.
Thanks, Pete.
For some reason, I didn't know that was this, that was 60 days, it was 2 meetings, yeah.
We had 2 of them, so
You
God.
did it.
No, I did just, man, it came up so fast, you know, time's flying.
Time is flying.
Time's flying.
You've been enjoying life too much.
There's a mathematical reason for that, John. When you're
Christmas
5
and
years
joy.
old, 1 year is 20% of your life. When you're 50 years old, 1 year is 2%
I
of
guess
your
I'm
life.
not as smart as I was.
That's why it clicks by so much faster.
I never thought.
I never did either.
It just clicks by faster and faster.
It does.
Okay, no need for executive session, motion to adjourn.
Future topics.
Okay, future topic.
I spoke to Adam about this earlier too. And earlier in the meeting, he even mentioned that the UDO changes and some of our zoning changes. There was one, as our discussion too, Larry, I don't know if you remember, but
I do.
Just popping up this month is a new energy code with new construction that calls for an R30 in the walls, which if you do that by a prescription when you're building a new home, that would require a 2x8 exterior wall. You know, original construction all the way up until 1990.
I think I disagree with you on that. I think you could do it with a 2x6, but it would be expensive. Either way, it's
Or
expensive.
closed phone.
Right.
Do we recognize closed phone are factors?
You know, in everywhere in the country, they're all saying, how are we gonna make affordable housing, workforce housing? And then we're going with this, and this is a state energy code, not a federal, right? So somebody down in Springfield made this, right? I would like to see if we could discover who did it and if they would, consider a more reasonable 2x6 wall that would be normal with a normal pad. So I'll drop myself.
So what I'm hearing is a request to kind of see what it would look like to request an amendment to that local or state push.
Right.
We can certainly frame that. I mean, there's a couple of different things that are popping up, question-wise in terms of, or alternatives that are available, and there are, but it's still gonna be that R30, and what you're talking about is that if you do a 2x6, then you have interior and exterior solutions in terms of insulation.
But
spray
in my
foam
opinion, the
another one.
R30 has to be changed, because otherwise the expenses, that's where the expense is at.
Exactly.
It still gets back to the root. I think what John was talking about is how can we get back to where we were prior to June 1st was when, so it actually, the state adopted it in January 1, and all municipalities and counties had 180 days to implement it, so that was June 1.
Where are we at right now, R19?
We're not currently, we're at R30.
R30, right.
The way, so there's the other workaround solution on it, and this is one that we've been talking with all of our architects, developers, et cetera, is there's a res check program. So it's a residential energy compliance check, and it's a module that's put out by DECO. It basically grades the performance of a structure in terms of their energy conservation and their energy efficiency. So this goes through all the building shell and the envelope all the way through the electrical system. That performance demonstrating performance and compliance with that program, you can circumvent, which would otherwise be a prescriptive method and approach, which just the prescriptive method is you take the chart that's in the International Energy Conservation Code and basically put it on your drawings, and your design matches that. You can get away, you can steal some points under some performance measures in that compliance module, so your building doesn't necessarily have to hit that prescriptive measure. I can talk a little bit more about that or demonstrate that better.
I did that 25 years ago when I was building spec houses in Wisconsin. I mean, you had each wall, how much window you could have in each wall, thermal pane windows, what you did put in the ceiling, high efficiency furnace, it all went into a formula that you had to hit before you could get a building permit.
Yep.
Is that's what we're talking about?
That's exactly it.
Wisconsin's been doing this forever.
Yeah.
Oh, we've been doing it here too, res checks in Crystal Lake, all throughout the land. A res check will supersede or help you get through it.
Never built a house in Crystal Lake.
It's okay, I have.
Back to the original question is, what can we do to find out about this, and where do we go with it?
We'll get a formal answer. It's a big discussion, and it has been a big discussion throughout the state. And we've talked with a lot of our municipal colleagues about it. Specific questions to how are you guys enforcing this, to are we really enforcing this? So it's a very big discussion that has been met with resistance through a lot of our state agencies or associations that we're associated with, pushing for the same message. So we'll get some answers for you, and we'll get them formalized for August. I would hope and anticipate.
Okay. When did the state did this January 1st, and when do we have to comply?
We're already complying.
We're complying.
We're complying.
Okay, so we can't.
We got 5 houses on May 31st.
So we can't delay on this. I don't know how to go about it. We can't tell these 5 guys they got to put 2x8 walls up, and then 2 months from now tell the next guy he doesn't have to.
Correct. Yeah, and a lot of that's going to be that performance module through the res check, that they can find other means to gain and garner points.
And have we been doing the red check module regularly?
Yes.
Anyway, so it isn't like we got to add staff to do it or anything like that.
No, it's far easier to accept that as an application point than it is to even go through the prescriptive method.
Okay. We good with that then, John?
Yeah, as long as we, proactively, decide, are we gonna try to build workforce houses or affordable housing, or, the res check is fine, but at some point, somebody needs to talk to Springfield a little bit and say, hey, what direction are you going? Because you're saying 2 things.
Well, right, and the red check thing is not cost effective either, because then you're talking high efficiency furnace, triple pane windows, whatever. It just gets into a lot of money too. So okay.
Can't wait.
It sounds good, Dave. John's happy?
I know the right man's on it.
one out of 4.
I just say one thing, but I would want to make sure, I get that about the cost, right? But there's the long-term cost of higher energy bills too. So sometimes there's gotta be a balance somewhere where we can add in these measures.
You know, Carolyn, in the real world, I'll just tell you right now, and I understand what you're saying right now, but a builder could say, all right, let's do it with 2x8 walls, they're on sale at Menards, let's put that R30 insulation in. You know what, no need to caulk the windows though, we got this, and the house is drafty.
Yeah, no,
right? You know what I mean? You know, it's much easier to build a good house, you know, but at a certain point, you're gonna get to a part where you're gonna have to build double walls or build earth homes.
No, I understand that, that's not my point.
It's not real world.
That's really not my point. My point is that sometimes these things are expensive and we have to your point, we need to find a way to make it affordable. But we can't lose sight of that longer term cost that they will incur if their home isn't energy efficient. It gets expensive, right? And there's a lot of ways that we could be doing this better anyway, right? In terms of thinking about different systems that could be put into place up front, because retrofitting a house is a lot more expensive than maybe some of the measures that can be done up front. It's just a general comment, just something to think about. Because we want to get it right, right?
But I think a good practice of building a home that's well sealed is more important than well insulated. An example, a typical window has an insulation factor of what, 2.7?
Yeah,
Right. So I mean, I know there's a lot that goes into it. That's only that's my point. There's a lot that goes into it, and it's upfront costs versus long-term costs.
But it's just, it's naive to say you have a 2.7 R factor window on an R30 wall, right? Somebody with a full wall of windows would probably know that.
Okay. We good? Perfect, thank you. Okay, now.
So easy.
No executive session, and we're looking for a motion to adjourn by Carl, second